Some writers and directors can't seem to just settle on one main character, so why not have them all? Keep your head on a swivel because here come 10 films that swapped out their protagonist once the film was already well underway, changing the plot dramatically and dropping the floor from right underneath our butts. With major spoilers ahead, I'm Ewan, this is What Culture, and here are movies that shockingly switch protagonist halfway. Bad Times at the El Royale. The man behind Netflix's brilliant 2015 Daredevil TV series, Drew Goddard, returned to the big screen in 2018 with a mystery movie for the ages, Bad Times at the El Royale. The film sees an all-star cast of 7 strangers converge in a seedy motel that rests on state lines for a night of mystery, murder, and life-changing revelations. Although Bad Times features an ensemble cast, we enter it very much through Special Agent Dwight Broadbeck's perspective, a character portrayed by John Hamm, who attends the motel under the guise of a traveling salesman to uncover some state-level secrets. That is, until he is slain with a shotgun halfway through the film. Lost amid a sea of hustlers and two-faced good-for-nothings, our perspective gradually settles behind the unlikely duo of robber in priest clothing Doc O'Kelly, Jeff Bridges, and struggling singer Darlene Sweet, played by Cynthia Erivo. And we're lucky it does, because the unlikely pair are the only ones to make it out of the film alive. The Place Beyond the Pines. It can be a serious shocker when a film marketed as a run-of-the-mill Oscar bait drama takes some bold and ambitious narrative turns, but that is precisely what happened with Place Beyond the Pines. Carney motorbike stunt rider Luke, played by Ryan Gosling, botches a robbery and is shot dead around the midpoint of the film, at which point the narrative is taken up by Avery, a character played by Bradley Cooper, the police officer who did the shooting. Packing in not one but 2 major star leads, Place Beyond the Pines wrangles a challenging narrative that transitions from crime thriller into something more akin to a kitchen sink drama. Avery tries to make amends with Luke's widow and ultimately faces a reckoning some 15 years later when he comes face to face with Luke's son. 1917. Inspired by stories told to director Sam Mendes by his grandfather, 1917 follows soldier Tom Blake, played by Dean Charles Chapman, on his mission to carry a message calling off an attack the next morning that threatens the lives of 1,600 serving British soldiers, including his brother Joseph. Along with the ride is Lance Corporal William Schofield, played by George McKay, a veteran of the Somme and an all-around survivor. Thanks to some pretty serious brother-shaped motivation, Tom appears to be the film's lead at the beginning, utilizing a rich backstory and purpose to drive the plot forward. But after a close encounter with a rather ungrateful German fighter pilot seasoned to an early grave, William takes over to see their duty is done. Side effects. Steven Soderbergh loves nothing more than to experiment across genres and forms, having contributed widely to most corners of the film canon throughout an illustrious career. True to form, then, that his thriller Side Effects ends up being a two-hander. Emily Taylor, played by Rooney Mara, seemingly murders her husband in her sleep while on prescribed medication to manage her depression, but when she gets off scot-free, the blame and the narrative perspective shifts to her psychiatrist, Jonathan Banks, who has been ruined in the process of prescribing her the experimental drugs. But all is never as it seems. Transitioning from the tragic story of a woman let down by a flawed system to the struggle of a well-meaning but equally unfortunate psychiatrist, Side Effects uses the shift in protagonist to reveal the film's dark heart. Turns out Emily did it on purpose. Jonathan thus has to spend the remainder of the film clearing his name against our lying and deeply duplicitous original protagonist, discovering in the process that she has been in league with one of his colleagues all along. Sympathy for Mr. Vengeance. Sympathy for Mr. Vengeance, the first film in Park Chan-wook's Vengeance trilogy, wasn't well received upon release, less because of its narrative choices than because of its sudden and shocking moments of violence. The film sees a deaf-mute man Ryu, played by Shin Ha-kyun, engaged in a desperate struggle to help his ailing sister receive the kidney transplant she needs to survive. After being conned out of his own kidney and left penniless and in pain, he kidnaps the daughter of a wealthy businessman Park Dong-jin, played by Song Kang-ho, in a last-ditch attempt to get the money needed for his sister's operation. Wackiness thus ensues as Ryu tries to make sure the little girl doesn't know she's been kidnapped while sending her father ransom notes and pictures of her crying. However, in a tragic sequence of pure circumstance, Ryu's sister takes her own life, the little girl drowns, and the perspective shifts, becoming all about her father's quest for vengeance. Dong-jin hires investigators, uncovers clues, and tortures his way to Ryu's door, while Ryu's quest to exact his own revenge on the cartel who stole his kidney quietly continues in the background. Damsel, 2018. Not to be confused with the Millie Bobby Brown vehicle, David Zellner's Damsel is a western with a black comedy core that tramples over most of the usual cowboy cliches in order to access a twisted tale of a defiantly liberated woman. A spin on the classic damsel in distress trope set in the Old West, Penelope, Mia Wasikowska, is kidnapped from her beau, Samuel, played by Robert Pattinson. Thinking himself the captain of his soul and the hero of this story, Samuel goes on a mission to rescue the woman he loves, haphazardly killing her captor in the process. Alas, he discovers that she doesn't actually want to be with him at all, and that Penelope had staged her kidnapping in the hope of getting rid of him. Distraught, Samuel kills himself, and Penelope then becomes the new protagonist, fending off advances left and right while trying to survive and get maybe just a little of what she actually wants. Death Proof. After a string of hit movies, Quentin Tarantino used his industry pull to fund a passion project back in the mid-2000s. Gazing fondly back to the exploitation flicks of his youth, the director brought us Death Proof, a grindhouse B-movie homage about a serial killer stuntman named Mike, played by Kurt Russell, with a luxurious bouffant, a dynamite wardrobe, and an indestructible car. Stuntman Mike is not, however, the main character. The 4 young women he stalks take that honor, and around the midpoint of the movie, he wipes them off the face of the earth in one grisly quote-unquote accident. Yep, Death Proof sees all the main cast except for the antagonist ceremoniously bite the dust, to be replaced in the subsequent second half by a hardier foursome, played by Rosario Dawson, Mary Elizabeth Winstead, Tracy Toms, and real-life stuntwoman Zoe Bell, who proved to be Mike's undoing. Dressed to Kill. Man, you gotta love Brian De Palma. The 70s and 80s saw him turn out mega hits like Scarface and The Untouchables, the latter of which never fails to make me cry. Long live Agent Wallace, Gone But Not Forgotten, I Love You. Anyway, Dressed to Kill, a movie I actually only saw the other week and is clearly one of the most technically accomplished films of De Palma's career, follows Angie Dickinson's Kate Miller, who is bored with her home life and ready for some excitement that doesn't involve her husband rolling off her after a rigid 3-minute bit of missionary. Sadly, following a steamy encounter with a stranger, she is hacked to death in his apartment's elevator with a straight razor. The escort who witnesses the murder, Liz Blake, played by De Palma regular Nancy Allen, becomes the film's focus alongside Keith Gordon's Peter Miller, who you may recognize from Christine, as they try to find out precisely who done it before they get her too. Psycho, 1960. Alfred Hitchcock's chilling classic Psycho took audiences by storm in the 1960s and is still recognized today as not just a cornerstone feature of horror cinema, but also as a thoroughly original excursion into the possibilities of narrative storytelling. In a brisk opening act, Marion Crane, played by Janet Leigh, steals money from her work and makes a hasty getaway to her fancy man's place. On the way, she stops for the night at the Bates Motel, and things, well, they take a turn for the unexpected. Marion is slain, suddenly and brutally, by Mother in the motel shower, passing the narrative torch to her sister and the private detective investigating her murder. The story then focuses on the horrors that surround Norman Bates, played by the legendary Anthony Perkins, and the film goes from potential crime caper to bloody disturbing horror. Barbarian. 2022's Barbarian starts off as a psychological thriller set in a rented house in Detroit that 2 people have booked, bringing Tess Marshall, Georgina Campbell, into collision with Keith Toshko, an immediately creepy Bill Skarsgård. As the evening progresses, the pair unwind, and it seems Keith isn't such a bad guy after all. The night goes smoothly and the pair head out for the day, safe in the knowledge that they will be returning not to a psychopathic killer, but to maybe a new friend. This sets up a 1-2-3 punch. Keith turns out to be neither antagonist nor protagonist and is killed in the first act. Tess is kidnapped by a creature living under the house, and we are then flung many states away from the action, characters, and established plot. Writer and director Zach Kreger piles on the tension by having the film switch on a whim to the life of sleazy TV actor AJ Gilbride, played by a brilliant Justin Long, who owns and manages the rental from California. Fired for being a big old creep to his co-stars, he makes the cross-state journey to inspect the place before he can sell it to cover his legal costs. The film then pivots to a creature feature flick as AJ uncovers the subterranean maze under the house, where he finds Tess and has to fight dirty to make it back out with his life intact.